Have questions about why Jews believe different things than Christians do about the Messiah. So I put together a pretty interesting thing about just several messianic prophecies in the Old Testament that have been fulfilled in the New. But we had some questions this morning about the Ark of the Covenant. Yeah. And so I'm going to do a little talking this morning about the Ark and about the temple, and we'll do the messianic prophecies next time. But so we're going to call this one Temple Principles. All right. The first time, or the last time, I guess, that we did this was in July of this last year. And it was an interesting day in the Hebrew calendar. It was called Tisha B'Av. That's the 9th day of the month of Av. And the Hebrews, like in their synagogue services, they have a 24-hour period of mourning. And the ark, there's an ark in all the synagogues where they keep the Torah scrolls and stuff, and they cover it with a black veil on this day. And so the reason is that they say that 5 misfortunes befell the Jews on the same day in history. So different years, but the same day in history. They say that both times that the temple was destroyed, the first temple that was Solomon's, right, that was destroyed in 586 BC, and the second temple that was built and completed by Nehemiah when the exiles returned home with Zerubbabel, Ezra, and Nehemiah. That temple was destroyed in 70 AD by the Romans, and they say that it happened on the same day. Right? They say that in the 12th century, when the Jews were expelled from England, was on that day, and they say that in the 14th century, when the Jews were expelled from Spain, was on that same day. So the 9th day of Av, they say it's just a period of mourning for the Jews. Also, there was a revolt that was led by a guy named Bar Kokhba. That means son of star. In 132 AD, it was against the Romans. Also, he basically got smashed, and just everybody got obliterated in this revolt.
Hammered, or?
No, that wasn't the Maccabees.
Like physically smashed, or like?
Oh, I got you. Wow. No,
plowed or plow.
Right. This guy, primo. Yeah. So, but this was one of the major revolts that the Jews led, and the Maccabean revolt that was 160 BC, and Maccabee means hammer, is what I thought that when you said hammer. Yep. And then there was another one that was what they call the Great War. That was like 65 to 70 AD. But then the one right after that was the Bar Kokhba revolt in 130-ish AD, like 132. But they say that the day that the Romans crushed all these revolters was the same day. So when I wrote this thing about the temple, it was on that day. And so because it was that day in the Hebrew calendar, we were discussing it. But why it's interesting is just to show that both temples were destroyed on the same day, years apart, almost 600 years apart, right? So the temple in Judaism was like their banner, like we have our American flag or whatever that we think is like our real banner and our like picture of freedom and what we stand for and yada yada. Theirs was the temple, right? And now they have the flag, right, Tej? Amen. All right, what's that?
Sorry, David.
And they also call it the Magin David. That's the shield of David. The Jews call it the shield of David. And so this was adopted as their symbol. right? In 48, when they became a state again, had a flag. They adopted this as the symbol. TJ, remember the legend about this? Where the symbol came from?
Mm-hmm.
What is it?
Saul's son, what was his name? Jonathan?
Yeah.
He died, and David took his shield and welded his shield and Jonathan's shield together.
Oh, that's cool.
Star David.
Yeah, and that's the legend. It's a fairly new adoption, really. It's not as ancient as you would think, because they were in the diaspora, the scattering, the exile for so long. But that's one of the sort of folklore tales about it, is that David and Jonathan were in covenant and brothers with each other. You know, when Jonathan, Saul's son, died alongside Saul, that David fetched their bodies and their armor, and then he took the shield and he welded it to his shield. And when he would come in after victories and he would hold his shield above him, that it became this, it was that symbol, right? And so they picked it as their symbol of victory, and it still is today.
Amen.
But so this has come about in a time when there wasn't a temple, right? So the reason that it's a banner aside, it would be the temple where it's still standing, would be the banner, right? So they take pride in it, just like they do their flag. They took pride in the temple. So before the temple was a temple, it was the tabernacle, right? And the tabernacle was, you guys remember in the wilderness, Moses, right? With me? Yeah. And the implements that were inside the tabernacle were constructed by who? Anyone remember that? The guy that was filled with wisdom and knowledge and understanding to make these things. You remember who it was?
Solomon?
That was the temple and the tabernacle. Remember, the implements was Bezalel, and you don't see much about him, but it says he was the son of Uri, who was the son of Hur. And remember, Hur was one of the two that was holding up Aaron's arms, you know? Hur, and that's a testimony in itself that Aaron and Moses were both big names, really. They swung a big stick, literally, right?
Literally.
Back then in Hur, we don't know much about him, but he was alongside holding up Moses' weary arms, you know, while the victory was won. We need more people like that. You know?
Yeah.
An armor bearer type
Indians.
situation.
More Indians.
Sure. And so the gentlemen that were in charge of transporting and taking care of the tabernacle were who?
Levites.
The Levites. Good. And Levi, remember, was the son of Jacob, right? So it was Adam, Seth, Enosh, Canaan, Mahalalel, Jared, Enoch, Methuselah, Lamech, Noah, Shem, Arphaxad, Selah, Eber, Peleg, Ru, Serug, Nahor, Terah, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Levi, right? And so then Levi's sons were Gershon, Merari, and Kohath. And so they were the three classes of the Levites, right? So they were the ones that were responsible for taking care of all these temple implements, all right?
Should get A+ right there. Remember Nod's names. I bet that was hard.
Appreciate that.
Yeah.
Primo.
Sensitive.
So, and another interesting thing about the tabernacle, Blaine's reading a book right now that's about how each implement in the tabernacle corresponds to the body of Christ, and then also to what it would be like in heaven. And just as the temple was like a blueprint of what the heavenly temple will be like on earth, right? So there's a lot of correlations between the temple and the tabernacle, also in messianic typology. That's like a foreshadowing of Jesus in the Old Testament. That's all that is. Did you have a question, Big Guy? Primo?
I don't even know how to pronounce his names, but people that built the tabernacle, their name, first name was spelled U-R-I, son of H-U-R.
Yeah, Uri, Hur. Yep, and then Bezalel was the son. And it doesn't actually say in the Bible about her who his wife was, but the legend, at least in Judaism, is that her was married to Miriam. It's Moses' sister. So they were close in that regard also. Okay, so the first temple was Solomon's temple, right? Solomon, and then Hiram, that was the king of Tyre, was the one that quarried out all these huge stones and the cedars of Lebanon to bring in. And Hiram, there was also a covenant there between Hiram and Solomon. So what brought this about this morning was the questions about the ark, right? So the ark is contained within the Holy of Holies of this first temple. And he asked where the ark is, right? Pastor John, what do you think? Where's the ark at? Any idea?
It's in one. Well, I really think it's buried underneath the Temple Mount. I think that they hid it just before the conquest of Babylon, but I don't know.
And that very well may be.
It also could have been because of their depravity. They could have allowed it to be taken just like Top 9 and Phinehas.
Yeah.
Top 9 and Phinehas are depraved, and because of their depravity, they allowed it to be taken by the Philistines. So some people think it was actually captured, but the listing, it's not in the listing of the articles of the temple.
Right, when
So
they
that's
were
really
returning from
strange.
exile. Yeah.
That's really strange it's not listed. So some people also think it was taken to Ethiopia and it was actually copied, and the copy was left inside. The real one was taken to Ethiopia. I'm really going for underneath the temple now. There's
And Harrison Ford.
Harrison Ford, all the way.
Well, that's-
I just kind of hope they did that. I kind of hope they did that. But there's a little part of me that thinks, I wonder if they were so tainted at that time. Because they set up worship to Chemosh, right on the hillside outside of Jerusalem. It says, chills up my spine to think that Solomon allowed that to take place. He brought it right into the temple. And because of that, when you start mixing witchcraft with God just is so hurt and so angry, furious. Yeah, he's furious. So those are the three options in my kind of thing. I'm gonna kind of go with, I'm praying that there's a remnant that said, hey, we need and we're gonna hide this thing.
Yeah. Well, that's very good. And so what Pastor is saying is that there are tunnels and corridors underneath the Temple Mount. And a popular theory is that maybe it's down in there somewhere, in the bowels of the city. That it's under there. Some say that through the visitation of the Queen of Sheba, and that possibly why it could have been in Ethiopia was that when she left with another gift from Solomon, who we know was quite a ladies' man, right? That maybe she had a child that was Solomon's, and that the rightful heir to the throne and the seed of David would have been with her, and that the ark is in Ethiopia somewhere. And Ethiopia has a huge religious movement there that are some Jewish population and some Christian also, that they all just grow up basically knowing, or what they think to know is that they have the ark there. So they all pretty much think that.
They really do.
Yeah, they absolutely do. Absolutely. And they even have a parade each year where they carry something through the city that is like a representation or exactly, a replica. And then there was another one from just Jewish lore that is the Talmud, that's like the oral tradition stuff, that Jeremiah actually had something to do with the hiding of it, and that God like put his hand over where it would be in a mountain, and that it's just hidden in there, and that when the third temple is constructed, and that all the implements are already pretty much made. The Temple Institute in Jerusalem have already built most everything that will go into the third temple, but they say that God has hid it in this mountain, and that once it's ready, that he'll release it, and that, so it's safe somewhere. Is what the Jews think, at least somewhere it's safe. The second temple we know came about when, after 586, the Babylonian exile happened after the first temple was destroyed. That roughly 70 years later, they come back. That Darius, I think it was Darius, the Persian king, after he conquered Babylon, that his part of his domestic affair policy was to let captives go home, right? So the first group, led by Zerubbabel, went back home, and the second was led by Ezra, and the third was led by Nehemiah. And so Nehemiah ended up being the one that helped finish the wall. In 52 days, it says, after all this time that they put into it, that it hadn't been completed, that once Nehemiah, is a picture of leadership, really, once he came about, finished it in 2 months, right? Interesting thing, Zerubbabel's name means begotten in Babylon. Ezra's name means help. And Nehemiah's name means God has consoled. Interesting thing about their names. So then the second temple, another thing, it was what came about in the time that the second temple was destroyed was this what they call the Great War, what the Jews call the Great War, with the Romans, right? It fell in 70 AD. This is also right after Masada fell. Remember, Masada was Herod's temple, or like a fortress that's built up in this mountain, and that the last sect of radical Jews that are called the Sicarii were hid out in Masada. There was 900 and some of them, and the Romans coming there, they call it, some call it a mass suicide. It really wasn't that exactly, but it was that they drew, cast lots or whatever to pick 10 people that killed basically everyone's families, right, and their own families too, as to prevent being taken by the Romans and being made slaves, and women, God knows what they would do to the children and women. And so then out of those 10, they drew lots again for one person to kill those people, and then one man committed suicide. And Josephus is the one that writes the best, really the only account of this historically. And what they say is that there was a grandmother and a couple kids that were hid out in there that survived this to tell the story. And so we got, Josephus is right there on the bookshelves if you guys are curious or anything you want to read about it. Josephus, it's a staple in every pastor's bookshelf, I would say. It's a great history of the Jews written by a guy that, if you were in Jerusalem talking to a Jew, he probably wouldn't want to talk about Josephus. They kind of consider him a traitor because he was involved in a battle where somehow he survived, but all these other Jews were killed. And then he went to work for the Romans in writing a history. So the compendium of Jewish history that he wrote, it for Rome, but it's really good history of Jews and stuff that we don't have anywhere else. And he was I don't know if he was a contemporary with Christ, but lived at least within the same 100 years and writes about some of our New Testament heroes. anyway, the Masada is interesting in that you see how the lengths that these people went to as to not be put under subjection to Rome, and there's still that fierce. The Samson initiative is an Israeli policy about if they're. You remember what Samson did in the whether he pushed or whatever the pillars, and ended up killing more Philistines in death than he had in life, but also killing himself. There's a policy where if Israel is about to be taken on all sides, that they're going to detonate nuclear weapons on their borders that will end up killing a lot of Jews, but they're hoping to reserve a remnant that'll be right in the center of the city. And so that's an actual policy that may someday happen.
What's a remnant?
A leftover, a group remaining after something. So, very intense is the deal, right? And they still are to this day. They were then. Well, Ezra is also just a huge figure. Ezra was a part of what they call the Great Assembly that created the doctrine that now is modern day Judaism. And he's also the one that's attributed for the creating of the synagogue. That's the service outside the temple, which is huge for Jews living in constant exile, not having a temple since 70 AD. The synagogue service is a tremendous deal. And also the legend that we have about him from that's written in the Apocrypha, that when we know Ezra was a scribe, and then also the priestly line, which was rare, that when Babylon destroyed the temple and took the temple implements, that were it not for Ezra reciting scriptures from memory, like it says in our version of Ezra that there was a platform built and he recited scriptures. But what it says in those extra books, those Esdras books in the Apocrypha, is that from memory he recited 94 scriptures, is what it says. We don't know what the numbering would have been at the time. But so what the legend is that through memory, Ezra preserved our holy scriptures. Right? And this is just a testimony of what it's like, what a diligent man, that studies the word day and night can do for future generations. Ezra is one of my absolute heroes of the Hebrew faith. He's one of my heroes. And Esther is also from this time period she was born into the Persian exile, and we see that in her name. Esther is a derivation of Ishtar, that was a Persian god. Right? Her Hebrew name was Hadassah, that means myrtle. Ishtar means star. And the Hebrew for star was Kopa. Remember, Bar Kopa was the sun star that led to that result. Anyway, so the third temple, the implements being built now, the priestly line, they still think that they have, that's the Kohens, the Kohanim is the priestly line, are in charge of what's called the Temple Institute, they've already made the implements to go into the temple, and they're just waiting for something to happen. Something is going to happen. It's an exciting time in Israel, really, and nobody knows exactly what's going to happen, but the abomination of desolation is also to come. And what's going to happen is there's going to be a third temple that the Antichrist is going to do something in it. We don't know exactly what's going to happen, but he's going to desecrate the temple. It's going to be, it's going to be a scary thing. We don't know exactly what's going to happen, but the temple is going to be desecrated by the Antichrist. Right? So respect and reverence is what we can really learn from how the Hebrews behaved and treated their temple. And respect and reverence is just a complete, something that we've lost track of, I think. Remember this? The Tetragrammaton, right? God's name. The Yod, Hey, Vav, Hey. It's where we get Yahweh, and it's where we get Jehovah, right? When the Masoretes that were the scribes that wrote the Bible, whenever they were writing this, they would stop and they would wash themselves and they would change the tip of their quill before, like after they wrote one letter, they would stop and wash themselves. After every time they wrote this name, they would stop, right? They would write this, they would stop, they would change this, they would wash themselves, they would write this, do the same thing, right? That's reverence for the word. And it's also with the book of Esther, we were just talking about that, is that people often wonder why God's name isn't in Esther one time. And it's probably because it was written for a group that was in exile and it was meant to travel from place to place, and they didn't want to put God's name on something that they knew were probably going to get damaged in the process of travel. Is one theory of why that may be. So what we could say, how we apply like information, application, is transformation, right? You don't want to just do information, you don't want to just do application, but both of them, transformation. So what we could say is applying temple principles to our lives is reverence, right? Is something that we could do like in our prayer life or in our devotion life when we like you don't just go into prayer and you say, God, I want this and this and this. You go and you give him praise. You apply the temple to your prayer life. You go through the different courts. You don't just jump straight into the Holy of Holies, right? You go through a process. And it's the same in your study life. You don't just read a chapter and quit. You know, he's going to reveal things in the Holy of Holies that might take 3 hours that he wouldn't in the outer court. Amen? Hey, give me Exodus 3:5. Give me Acts 7:33, and then give me Joshua 5:13-15. All right. And so, in sacrificial terms, now, what is pleasing to God is that we offer our bodies as living sacrifices, right? And our actions and how we treat each other and how we behave, or the aroma, right? The sweet, savory aroma to God. Go ahead.
All right.
Loudly.
Do not come any closer, the Lord warned. Take off your sandals, for you are standing on holy ground. I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. When Moses heard this, he covered his face because he was afraid to look at God.
Go ahead.
Didn't you tell me in Acts
7:33.
Then the Lord said to him, take your sandals off your feet, for the place where you stand is holy ground.
Joshua 5:13-15. Now when Joshua was near Jericho, he looked up and saw a man standing in front of him with a drawn sword in his hand. Joshua went up to him and asked, are you for us or for our enemies? Neither, he replied, but as commander of the army of the Lord, I have now come. Then Joshua fell face down to the ground in reverence and asked him, what message does the Lord have for his servant? The commander of the Lord's army replied, take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy.
All right. Well, what I would say, man, is that this place, even though it is flawed, it's run by men. It's a flawed place, and anything that man has a hand in isn't going to be perfect, right? But it's holy ground to me, right? This is my whole life, and even if you don't feel that way about it right now, act like it. Help your brothers that are coming in that see or that are having issues. They're not going to feel like they're on holy ground. Come alongside them. Help your brothers. Remember that we're all trying to get somewhere together, and this is a time of transformation for us all, and it's a beautiful thing you guys are going to remember forever. But in your first little time, it may not always seem that way, and you might think when you act like this place is a crap hole or something, or like someone made you be here or something, you might think it's not a big deal when you're actually spreading poison and you're infecting your brother. Just remember that just helping one man while you're here, helping him can make a difference. And like the kid on the seashore with 100 washed up starfish or whatever, and he's throwing them back. You know, a guy comes up and he sees 1,000 starfish. He says, you know, you're not making any difference. And the kid throws one. He said, I made a difference to that one. You know, it just means every man that you help is a soul saved, and it's a victory in the kingdom. So just that's it. So just this is holy ground. Amen.
Amen. It is.
All right, you guys are good.